All right. Welcome back to the Foxhole. Foxtrotting in a Foxhole. Season 10, Episode 10, number 298 overall. Your faithful host, Ken Harlan, coming to you on a fabulous Friday. Oh, yeah. Just got done watching some PSG. Can't wait to talk about that. Gee whiz. It's a beautiful day. Should be out flying a drone. As always, we think the shout out to our friends at Road and Zoom and Potenzic and Tourbox, Purple Planet, all these folks that help make the podcast happen. Give them a shout out because I do. Ain't getting paid for it. Wish I was, but we'll work towards that as far as getting sponsors someday. Want to be on this or Aftershocks or even SJ Gets Down? Drop a line, FTINFX at gmail.com, or call the hotline, 541. Was that? Yeah, 541-525-0896. Love to hear from you. Leave a message or something like that. Yeah, Aftershocks is coming along. We're almost through the first season of that. And that's the scene. Well, that's coming at some point. So SJ Gets Down. We did another episode this week, so looking forward to her releasing that. A lot of fun going on in the pod sphere as far as myself and my friends are concerned. Well, let's get chilling, shall we? Episode 298 coming at you. Open face. No more Jordan conversations for 2025. I didn't read too much into this because I was appalled in the first place. I mean, it's cool that the Peacock has the NBA again, and it seems like they're doing a better job of showcasing it as far as having games in the week and making it something we can look forward to tuning into. But I figured paying Jordan millions for what one conversation and gee, the things he said to Trico, was he really waxing any great insights? There's going to be no more of them. And I don't know how many millions he supposedly made for that one afternoon that Trico spent in his living room. Basically, not even giving him softballs. Pretty much putting the ball in the tee and saying, here you go, King." Just laughing at us all. Yeah. 2026, man. Week 3, we're just getting more eye popping stuff. It's going to be like that, huh? Okay. And speaking of 2026, you hear this thing with the 49ers? I guess there's a conspiracy about the electrical substation that is on the premises. And apparently, it's led to a lot of the injuries that the team has sustained supposedly in the last couple of years. I mean, it's taken seriously enough that John Lynch says, "Yeah, we'll look into it." Maybe I hope he was being funny, because if not, like I said, 2026 is bringing all kinds of sauce if that's truly the case. Then you've got this Naga group that just refuses to go away. As a Commanders fan, I know Naga too well. Not Maga, but Naga. I don't know if they're Magas. I think they are, but or not. I don't want to cast aspersions or prop somebody up if I'm incorrect. But it's the Native Americans Guardians Association. They've been screaming about stuff like the commander's name being changed, and I guess Governor Hochul in New York and her people established a law, and maybe it was before her, but basically bans the use of Native American mascots, and they're trying to get the Supreme Court to hear it and call it unconstitutional, and who knows what that'll mean as far as the schools go. And that I guess people who do want it, and I've had this conversation with lots of natives and people of color and people not of color on the right, wrong, and in between side of this debate, and for it to still be going on, and why it means so much to people. When I'm just like, you folks who are screaming about, hey, this is who we are, you can't strip that away from us. Nobody's stripping anything away from you. Let's talk about giving people some jobs. Let's talk about giving people scholarships. Let's talk about doing some real positive stuff instead of these stupid mascots. I mean, right? If you really, Naga, if you were really interested, in forwarding the cause of what you claim, and I've seen the dude, and I've seen some of the arguments they've made in behalf of the Commanders and the Guardians, and it's just, yeah, right. It's 2026, bro. Well, I tell you, I'm glad that this one hasn't gotten a lot of traction. I was kind of nervous it did. It was going to, I should say. Something about Mike Tomlin. Obviously he'd been in the news after stepping down from the Steelers after a very decorated career, and some folks were trying to push on the internet that he walked away to deal with his side bay. They kind of referenced it quietly. I was watching Fearless. Um, I haven't heard it get a lot of traction, so I don't think that's the case. I mean, it just really makes more sense. People started booing him and not speaking fondly of him. And the guy's got an ego, and he's accomplished enough to walk away, like his two predecessors, Mr. Knoll and Mr. Cower, did. No shame in that at all. Mm, internet, something else. I know the digital age has created so many opportunities for us to know about things we probably shouldn't give a shit about. The whole thing with Kevin Stefanski getting hired in Atlanta. I won't even get into what the Shadura sexuals, as Jason Whitlock calls them. I think it's an apt name for the psychos that follow that guy. What they're saying about Stefanski. But people were trying to put in a good word because Stefanski, he's held in high regard. I've never been that crazy about him, but I will acknowledge, as far as this incarnation of the Cleveland football team, he's somebody who's had some success as far as getting playoffs. Hell of a lot better than Hugh Jackson. We know this. Anyway, Mr. Blank hired him. Which is a good hire for him. Good place to land, especially with that squad that clearly wasn't maximized under Raheem Morris, excuse me. Hey, facts are facts. Nobody knows there's so much stuff going on here today. Let me get it together here. But Baker Mayfield kind of like took offense because somebody had asked him about the Browns being a dumpster fire and all this stuff, especially dealing with Baker, which it wasn't because they made the playoffs. And, Baker was kind of like, won the dumpster fire. And by the way, I never got a fair, a buy text and all this other stuff. And I'm just thinking, wow, you wouldn't even know what was going on in Atlanta if it wasn't for the internet, Baker. And I'm with Coach Mangini, who just says, why do you care? Move on from that. That was 5 or 10 minutes ago, right? You had a stop in Charlotte, a, a real cup of coffee in Inglewood, and now you found a decent home getting paid fairly well in Tampa. Who cares? And he says you'll see him twice a year. Okay, well, see him twice a year and settle on the field as opposed to, Baker and that chip on his shoulder. I should cut him a little bit of slack. Yeah, all right. Let's get cooking here, man. This is open face. You see Sharon Moore in court the other day? He's trying to get the charges dismissed, kind of going batshit crazy, on his side bay. But the look on his wife, boy, she could cut glass with that with the level of pissed off. I'm just like going, shit, man. That's some what's her name? The Kennedy that had to deal with Joan right after Chappaquiddick. It was one of those Chappaquiddick looks like, oh, really, mother, you know what? Okay, so we did talk about this one a while back, and now that the events are taking on a very surreal flavor, and I'm going to just leave it at that. This is as far as Minneapolis, St. Paul. I'm not going to cast aspersions on the whole state, but we do know that the Twin Cities are definitely what Bill Haley and the Comets were all about in the 50s. So it's rock and roll over there for sure. And see, we don't take sides in any of this stuff. We just podcast. But as the world intersects, and Michelle Tafoya announcing that she's running for Senate has got to be one of the better 2026 appetizers you can put on the plate. Yeah, as I said a few weeks back when I first saw this, I thought, well, this is a state that, did have Jesse Ventura, among others. Anything's possible. But I'm like, she's on the wrong side of the aisle. Yeah. Can't wait to see how some of her town hall meetings go on the campaign trail. I mean, you weren't that popular of an announcer. You weren't hated. But then, you whipped the stage still route, and then people decided they didn't love you so much. Yeah, running for the Senate. Was better you than Feinbaum. How about that? I'm glad Feinbaum came to his senses and said, yeah, I'll just make this scratch. Being snarky about the SEC not being as relevant as it once was. Okay. What else do we have here? I think it's interesting, and hopefully, this is a good thing for the fledgling United States Football League. Yeah, that UFL. They're gonna ESPN's gonna is pledged to give them the slot that was previously held by Sunday Night Baseball. NBC is gonna be doing baseball. I'll talk more about that when we get to the beautiful. I mean the Nightfall of Diamonds. Let's not get too far of ourselves. But they're gonna take over that slot on Sunday nights. It's a good showcase, especially that time of year. It's kind of interesting, as many people argue that hey, that's a great spot for the women's elite eight. I said, no, we're gonna just put it in weird times like we've always done. We're gonna try to give this football league some love since we decided to let the Peacock have Sunday nights in baseball. Yeah. Okay. Let's have a little fun here. Close out open face. So I just saw this the other day. Developers pulling the plug on the Atari themed casino. I didn't know there was gonna be an Atari themed casino in Las Vegas. Somehow that skipped my radar. And I try to keep an eye on all things Vegas. So I'm like, wow. They're saying they may do it in another city, which begs the question where that might be. And well, if it's not Vegas, okay, is it going to be an Indian casino? Yeah. Mm. It does pique the curiosity as far as what the hell themes they would have had as far as Atari and casino. Oh boy, the mind just expands endlessly on that one. Then I find out that Metallica is going to play the Spear, setting up for a residency, I believe, next year or end of this year. Oh man, that's going to be loud. And like I said on Aftershocks 27, check it out. Like and subscribe to FTINFX Media's YouTube channel while you're at it. The Spear V2, which is probably going to be half the size of the one in Vegas. I'm guessing it's going to seat like 6,000. So that's pretty cool for the DMV, along with this RFK 2.0, as I was talking about the other day. Yeah. All right, folks, we're up the gate, rocking and rolling. When we come back, we have a lot to speak to as far as the 43K view. See you there. All right, then. Welcome back to the Foxhole. You've made the host, Ken Harlan here. Beautiful day. Should be outside, but I don't mind sitting here getting the podcast out since I didn't do it yesterday, which was also a beautiful day in the end. Kind of cold still, but a little bit warmer today at least. Whatever you're like rolling at it. Let's see here. Actually, 43 right now. Man, might have to go out and barbecue if it gets 1 or 2 degrees warmer. You know, remember Stringer Bell talking about that 40-degree day? You know, whenever I can get a wire reference in, I'm always going to drop one. Okay. Well, that said, I think we'll let the homies and homettes off. It's beautiful enough just to fly the drones over the UFO and call it good. But let's take the high view above the campuses of America. Well, we spoke quite a bit in Aftershocks, which you should definitely check out, number 27 on YouTube, about the national championship game. And that's been a couple of days. I've had more time to think about it. I've heard some great conversations online and on TV as far as Indiana's legacy, what it means for the future. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff going on, and I'm sure that before this podcast is over, there'll be 3 or 4 things that drop that could have been in this episode. It's just so many things that are zipping past me and not having time to like, hey, wait a minute, let me think about this and what am I going to say about it. But let's try it. Well, we'll start with the game itself. As I said on Aftershocks, it's historic. And, it's hard to contextualize it, though, and as some of the people online and on TV, you've got these 23 to 25 year olds playing against a lot of these kids, depending on which way you go. I'm not going to call it fair, because I've been hearing that from Duck fans. Oh, they're so young, and that's, up against men. In this era, as I said the other day, when you can go out and buy anything you freaking want, we don't want to hear any of that bullshit about this and that. It's okay to contextually point out that, yeah, this is kind of unique, but then again, if you could take a lot of your guys from James Madison and keep them together and give them all NIL deals and kind of run it like a regime, it shouldn't be that shocking, and we shouldn't be falling all over ourselves about what Indiana has done in this day and age. Because, as many people have pointed out, you wouldn't have pulled this off in Saban's era before NIL. They were, if they could have, they would have. I think that is fair to say, and that's nothing to diminish what Indiana and Coach Signetti are about. It is one of the great stories of all time, no question about it. With these folks saying it's the greatest sports story of all time, well, that's bullshit. Okay, let's not even get all misty, prisoner of the moment, because we want to have a feel good moment in a real shitty world right now. When the fact that, you're basically constructing professional type squads and being able to pay them and keep them together. Gee, since you don't really have a union and stuff like that, as long as they're happy with you and you're happy with them, you have a chance to build something special. And that's what Indiana did. And in this weird world, and we'll see if we get some normalcy in terms of motherfuckers, pardon my language, playing 8,000 years and going to 8 or 9 schools. If we can. Oh man, got a note from my buddy yesterday. But yeah, if we can somehow get our arms around that or at least make that sensible, then we'll see what happens moving forward with a program like Indiana. Some coach from a mid-tier program, even like Dion did Jackson State, very similar. Obviously not to this extent. Yeah, yeah. Okay, let's move on here. It was the most watched CFP game in this era, whatever that means. Obviously in the CFP era, the fact that you had the U in a compelling Indiana, not surprising there. The CFP will remain at 12 teams for 2026. Too much to discuss before going to 14 or 28 or 24, as they've been saying. So, not a surprise there. The real talk is what's going on in the courtroom and what the lawyers are up to. You got, I think I spoke about it on the Aftershocks, the kid from Duke who's said, "Hey, you can enter the portal, but you can't make a decision until we figure out what to do." He signed a contract to stay at Duke. Now Mario needs a quarterback down in Coral Gables. Oh hell yeah! I'll go down and be the Canes, be the next, be the next stud quarterback that hopefully does what Carson Beck was unable to pull off. Mm-hmm. Like I've been saying for the last couple of weeks, they've been kind of getting their ducks in a row, but now Mr. Shambliss, the kid from Old Miss, he's in court trying to get another year. Mm-hmm. Man, I thought this is what I found kind of funny. I remember Jaden Rashada, the kid that kind of was a harbinger of the madness to come. Didn't he start out at Florida, then Arizona State? I know this last year he's played at Sac State, and I'm like, what the hell was this kid doing at Sac State when at one point he was like the most highly regarded high school prospect? And this talk about a cat. I'm looking at one of these cat food commercials on TV that has 9 lives, and of course in college you can have 9, maybe 10 lives. This dude certainly has it. And I guess he is going to Starkville to play at Mississippi State. Yeah. Kid's been sitting back, living the good life, eating the. Remember Big's Hi You Hee Hee, you old school Eugene folks who get the biscuits and gravy that was basically as big as a table, and the hash browns. That's what this kid's been living on with all these schools, man. Good grief. Mm-mm-mm. It's interesting though, because Syracuse, obviously not the power they once were, and I get their athletic director coming out and feeling the need to make a statement such as this, but he says college football needs wholesale changes to be sustainable for everyone. Oh, gee, bad. You think, maybe that lady that gave Trump her Nobel Prize should pass it to this guy. Like, wow, for being so profound. I mean, he's got a point, but duh. Yeah, we know this. But since you people in your position won't grow balls and stand up to these kids and these coaches and these agents and every other greedy booster collective mofo, how the hell are you going to have wholesale changes? Just saying. The other thing that's interesting about all of this is this whole notion that exists in the new, what are we going to call it, ecosphere that college football kind of resides in, or just college sports in general, where there is this you've got to overpay or lose syndrome. Lose out to what? It's like, okay, if this guy who was we'll call it my poor man's Mendoza. Because I can't think of anybody at the top of my head, but Mendoza would be a great comparison here because he was a cow, kind of 500. And so you see somebody, let's just say they play at EMU, Eastern Michigan. Right? Charlie Batch back in the day. They're 6-6, and because you're at Coral Gables and you're Mario Cristobal, Miami, you're gonna like say, I'm gonna overpay this guy so Bill Belichick in my conference at Chapel Hill doesn't have the dude, even though this dude was 6-6 on a 6-6 team. Hard to say if he's a difference maker or not. Maybe he showed some promise. Cause that's kind of what Mendoza was at Cal, right? Tough kid. You liked his heart, liked his intangibles, but you weren't thinking, oh, in 2 years, this kid's going to be hoisting the Heisman and leading the Hoosiers to the national championship. So it is an interesting syndrome that guys like him are going to create moving forward. Yeah? Okay. I know. We got to talk about college basketball at some point, don't we? And now it's really about to be their floor. It's almost like I keep saying, this is when college basketball season truly should start. Yeah, I mean, you won't care about the games that were in November that are in kind of this part of January, early February. You push it back a few weeks. I mean, we could just fix the calendars in all college sports and sort of make it. If you're not going to give a shit about academics, like I've been saying on Aftershocks, and I think this as well, then let's go make calendars that align with your business pursuits, desires, and this makes sense for everybody involved. It'll suck for the regular students, but hey, they'll understand and they'll adapt too. Okay. Anyways, right now we've got, as far as D1 goes, three big men's programs are undefeated. Miami, Ohio, not necessarily big, but those kids have been really balling. Been taking the overtime twice, I think, in the past week. Good job there. The Nebraska kids who said stop storming the mofo court were supposed to beat these teams. They're still unbeaten. And obviously, those cool cats down in Tucson, the Cats, they're still undefeated. Give a big props to Mr. Elijah Arenas, Gilbert's son. That bad accident he had that we told you about. Was that like, I want to say in the Christmas season of 24? Was it? But yeah, he made it back to the court. It wasn't like one of those, you know, Elon Musk trucks or something like that. The Cybertruck that bad wreck. Lucky to walk away from, but yeah, finally made it back to the court. So good shout out there. Kind of interesting. A lot of the conversations as far as the women go, there's not much compared to how it's been in the past. We've been saying that. Even though my girl Kim Mulkey, she's always going to try to get headlines running in her mouth, but it's just not happening. But there seems to be a lot of discussion about legendary Audie Crooks. She's a big girl. She's a baller, but because the internet undefeated when it comes to being mean, finding all kinds of things to say about her game, especially since her Cyclones ain't doing so well. She's been kind of a whipping post. Yeah. How about Nebraska adding women's flag football as a varsity sport? I can't wait to see where this goes. As far as this becoming something that's the simp culture is going to lose their mind over. When we start seeing all the major programs and all the babes who've got some athletic talent figure out how I can get my platform here. Yeah, I can be the Calvin Johnson of this bitch. All right, folks, when we return, something you should probably know. All right. Welcome back to the Foxhole. Ice cold chillin' on a Wednesday. Your faithfulest host, Mr. Ken Harlan, rockin' and rollin' in the home base of FTINFX Media, Eagles Nest 2. And today we're in Studio B, watching a little first things first as they get ready to dissect conference champion weekend, among other things. A lot of stuff going on in the NBA. Yeah, there's so much stuff to talk about here. I mean, good grief. I can't, it'll probably spill into the next aftershocks, like a lot of aftershocks 27 spilled into this. Okay. But let's get to one of our favorite sequences that we do in this podcast, or segments, really. Something you should probably know, or things that happened this past week in the world of sports you might want to know or even care about. Yeah. Well, we got golf finally. It was a tournament last week, but since nobody big was in it, nobody cared. Oh, kind of like TGL. Ooh, coming with the zingers already. But this comes as no surprise right now, given recent developments. You know, Rory Boy, whenever they put a microphone in his mouth, as sullen as he tends to be, he's always got something you want to hear. And this week, it was no different. When asked about where Live and PGA are as far as any talks that would allow these entities to merge, he says the two entities are far apart and a deal ain't gonna be made anytime soon. Well, golly gee, gully gabookers. Yeah, we knew this. So why do you think Brooks wasn't homesick? Brooks was like, I got my money. I could have got back and play the PGA. And it's a, whatever is punitive, he's just like, well, yeah, whatever. And I feel that way for anybody who may want to come back. But yeah, I just don't. I thought it would be good at one point. Now I don't care. You know, I if Liv had been a little bit more dynamic, my opinion would change. But I've tried watching it, and just like TGL, it's almost like you're trying too hard to make something compelling that isn't. Am I lying? So, anyways, and there's some Liv still capable of snatching some headlines. Clearly, in the case of NCAA champion Michael Sasso, I think is how you pronounce that. Went to what's it, Mississippi State or Ole Miss? One of those two schools. Badass down there. But anyhow, because he's NCAA champion, which would give him a chance to play at Augusta. But he's like, no, I ain't going PGA. I'm gonna start my young career off taking that bag. And I don't know what Liv's paying him, but I can't blame the kid. Plenty of time to play at Augusta after you done grab that bag and are living like Fort Knox, or you are Fort Knox. And I hate to look at life in those terms, but if somebody's gonna do that, I can appreciate that. Hey, we like cash, and there's lots of cash over there at Live. If your conscience isn't affected by where it comes from, then more power to you. I'm always thinking about the adults in the room. That's an adult in the room, just like, yeah, okay. F the law. I'm gonna go take the big bag of cash. Mm. And did I say, once again, nobody cares about TGL? That it's just out there as its own entity, but just generating no buzz whatsoever? Okay. In addition to Conference Championship Weekend on Sunday, which obviously is the marquee event of the weekend, we've also got another major happening this weekend. in the city of all the famous lights and everything else at this point, Las Vegas, Nevada. And this is a big, momentous occasion for a circuit that's going to have a big year, especially, when you think UFC is going to have the big party at some point for America outside the capital. Luckily, it's not going to be on July 4th. That's been too much of a mockery. But they make their debut on Paramount. So I don't know what to make of this. Obviously, it being with the mouse, you know how the mouse treats its properties, and that's why they go for greener pastures. Hey, MLS, what's happening, among others. This is one of those. See, I'm not a big UFC fan, and maybe this will be my excuse to talk to my girl in Milwaukee who is, or my man, and find out what the scoop is as far as. I'm not that. I mean, I've watched UCL on Paramount. But they use the crew that's been on, CBS, the CBS Sports Network forever, right? My girl Katie Obdo, or Kate Scott, as she calls herself now, and Jamie, and the crew, and obviously Theory and the rest of the crew, right? So I don't. That's not necessarily a Paramount thing. Kind of took the CBS crew and just said okay. So I want to know what it's going to be like as far as Paramount taking over the UFC. I mean, we got the big match as far as the marquee event, isn't it? What's his face? Gaethje, or however you pronounce that. It's supposed to be a good fight. One way or the other, we'll report back on it next week. Yeah. So let's flip over the boxing real quick. I know we're all over the place. So with Terrence Crawford now in the penthouse, and by meaning the penthouse retiring, right? Truly living the good life with his 120-inch surround screen and all this other stuff. Boxing has to come up with a new pound for pound best of, because that's just what boxing does. And they say at this point it's heavyweight Alexander Usyk. Yeah, that Usyk, not that Usyk, this Usyk, and who's 22-0. So he's not lost, but they think he is pound for pound the best fighter in the world. Obviously, Tank Davis, well, if he can stay out of the Great Bar Hilton, which is highly unlikely. Okay. What else do we have here? Boy, isn't it touching? And it is touching. I'm not being facetious here either. Probably one of the baddest athletes in the world as far as taking and kicking serious ass. Sid the Kid, Cindy McLaughlin Leverone. She just announced her and her man are expecting their first kid. Cool. Because that kid's probably going to be a badass too. If she's got even, 1/8 of what Sid the Kid brings to the table. Mm-hmm. Okay. You see, there's a big round table coming up. As I was mentioning about the whole UFC and the big event that's going to be on the lawn of the Capitol at some point this year, I think in June. Well, I guess there's a big roundtable coming up. I don't know if Trump or some people in Congress are spearheading this, but I think it's probably going to be Trump. All the commissioners are going to attend and get their input on how their sports can celebrate America's 250th. Boy, definitely want to be serving the snacks at that meeting. Okay. Aussie Open. I'm going to have to check in with Mr. Big. We talked a little bit about it during the live stream, which I know none of you all tuned in for, but that's okay. We're still figuring it out. But we talked a little bit about that. Asked him about whether Mr. Joker, yeah, the tennis Joker, if he could rise up and get one last Grand Slam, which would be his 25th on his way out, capping up a magnificent career. We'll have to see. I got my eyes on Mr. Sinner myself. I think it kind of bothers you, though. You see the press conference? I mean, is everybody in the media got to be so damn woke? I mean, Coco bit it, but Coco has been I don't know. She's been inoculated by the RHBA, right? That weird crowd, and so she's got the whole victimhood thing. But I love how the other American woman just rose above it and just said it's not relevant. Don't ask me about what I think about living, in the age of Trump, being an athlete. So if I want, I'm here to kick ass. You like that kind of stuff, man. Keep that politics stuff out of it. And even if she had an opinion, she's a tennis player. What the fuck do you want from her as far as an opinion on the state of this country? Just just turn on the internet and figure it out yourself. Wow. Okay. We'll end on a nice one. Mercedes debuted its 2026 F1 car. The testing, all that stuff. Point being is the excitement begins to stir. My question is, we have this for the corner man. F1 going to Apple. Do we trust? I'm not gonna say MLS going to Apple is a total failure, but there's some hit and misses. And I'm kind of wondering F1 going to that platform, also leaving the mouse. Yeah, a lot to look forward to here in the weeks to come as far as 2026 goes. The slings and arrows are coming across the plate faster than I can read them. All right, folks, we will tune out for a second. When we return, we will talk some hardwood. All right, welcome back to the Foxhole. We're ice cold chilling as always. Hold on a second. Can't move my mouse across the room. That doesn't do me any good. Alrighty. Let's talk some hardwood. The NBA. Boy, there's a lot going on here. Obviously, Baxter Holmes's bombshell article about the Lakers and Jeannie Buss has rocked the NBA world. We talked a little bit about it on Aftershocks, but at that time, I hadn't distilled it. I still haven't, mind you. And it's a little too close for me, being a Lakers fan, to get into some of it. I mean, the takeaways already are you have to think LeBron and the Lakers, their little partnerships coming to an end, maybe sooner than later, definitely at the end of this season. Now, I know Jeannie tried to walk it back, saying it was unfair and hurtful. There's so many things where a lot of things can be true here. Because I do think Jeannie has a more of an ego and has kind of shown that she's kind of ruthless in terms of how she's dealt with her brothers and maybe did feel LeBron, as he tends to do, had too much of an ego and took too much credit for the Lakers' resurgence. And as I have pointed out many times, that his 8 years in LA have pretty much been mediocre, but I guess that's better than the dumpster fire the Lakers were in Jim Buss's final years as an owner and basically, ran Kobe into the ground, hiring Mr. Pringles and on and on and on and on. I don't want to get too, we don't need to rewrite history here. It's just fascinating. And, when I sit on Aftershocks the other day, was that the Bucks family needs to exit the building, and so does the James family. I said it the other day. I'm doubling down on that. There's just a certain stench in the air, and I do feel her enriching her cronies and making her brothers sympathetic figures. It is time for her and Jay Moore to go hang out at that. What she buy this really fat house on the overlooking the water. Go ride the horses and have some fun. And let the adults. You were an adult for a long time in your daddy's shadow, and we'll get into this more in a closer look when I just look at the sibling thing. Try to put a microscope under that. Let's move on here. LeBron not making the All Star game as a starter for the first time in 21 years. So they'll figure out a way to get his ass on there. NBA looking to have more games in Abu Dhabi. No surprise there. I mean, the NBA tapping into its global market, and I think one of the big aims of this last media rights deal. So, not a surprise there. Probably we'll see games all over the place, as we just saw, the two games over in Europe, the Grizzlies and Magic. Makes sense. Players complain, but they don't scoff at those bigger checks that all that money that Europe and Asia are bringing in. So there you go. All right. If Peyton Pritchard can almost make $40 million a season, not a knock on him, just saying. I talked the other day about Jimmy Buckets being out for the season. So watching the Warriors lose to the Mavericks last night, Draymond melting down. I'll double down what I said on the Lakers. The Warriors, the same thing. Some of those guys, well, that whole crew. And then Kaminga hurt his knee last night, apparently. And that's bad. All of a sudden, his trade value might be kaput. Yeah, it's time for this bunch to exit the stage as well. Okay. The one thing about exiting the stage is changing the perception and mindset. I spoke to this the other day about the NBA's reluctance to move on from this era. I mean, look at jersey sales. Curry's one. Team wise, the Lakers are one, Knicks are two. Granted, two biggest markets in the league. But I think the Thunder, which supposedly is the next dynasty and the face of the league, they're way down at 8. So even though there's a lot of times, as we see with Shedeur, the young generation wants their idols, apparently not. Because you have a team that has designs of being a dynasty, and folks don't really care about wearing their gear. I admit Oklahoma City has some pretty unflattering gear to begin with, but you can do something with that orange. Kids are saying, nah, man. If it was a Canes starter jacket, I'd be all over it. Thunder, whatever. Okay. Thunder really starting to ramp things back up. He talked about how they dismantled the Spurs previous week. This week they had a big matchup with the Rockets. Same thing. Just get out of the way, punks. So keep an eye on that. The big matchup. What was it, last Saturday? Where the Spurs lost to the Timberwolves. I don't know if I talked about this the other day. Wemby going like 39-9. Ant-Man having 55 and a losing cause. And we're not celebrating that. We're still hung up on Curry and LeBron. What's the matter with you people? I thought we were all about change in this world. Ha! Yeah. And of course, as soon as I start saying something good about the Thunder, they'll lose to the Heat, and I'll be like, what? That's the kind of week that it was. It's pretty crazy as we look, at the standings a little bit, especially over in the East, which I still can't figure out. Detroit still holding serve. And they've got, like a 4 or 5 game cushion. I think it's just interesting that Boston's 2. And as I was speaking about the other day, the Knicks stumbling, they're 3. But the Boston at 2, just seems crazy, especially that they're not at a full clip. The Pacers, just being an absolute dumpster fire. Other thing is the situation in Milwaukee, and we think that LeBron's time in LA is coming to an end, maybe sooner than later. The trade deadline is the 5th. The situation in Milwaukee is similarly bad. I mean, they're 11 in the East right now. They're 18 and 25, 4 and 6 in their last 10. What's going on there? Giannis is disinterested. I know he says he's loyal, but at some point, when when do you TNT that? Especially you had it right a while back, and you had to go around and listen to people and tinker around, and now you bring in Doc, and you know what we think about Doc. It's just not good, not good. You know, spoke about the Blazers. I think that's a great story. They won again last night, so they're now 23 and 22. Telling you, Clippers beat up on the Lakers last night again. I mean, Lakers made it a game, but still, something really wrong there. But I'll get into that in a closer look. Like I said, this Rivals Week, yeah, you can do the Lakers and the Clippers last night. That's kind of cool. But some of these matchups, like Oklahoma City and Milwaukee, aren't rivals. Okay? I said Denver and LA, I get that part a few nights ago as well. But well, it was like New Orleans and somebody else. Or I'm like thinking maybe geographically, but really nothing else there. You can't really say this is a rivalry. So unlike how MLS and MLB do it, I'm just not seeing the NBA's quite achieving here. Maybe back to the drawing board with that one. Great milestone this week. Can you believe the Kobe 81 game turns 20? A lot of folks talking about that moment this week, and because let's face it, there is no tape of Wilt scoring 100, so this is what we know as far as somebody going off, and that's why a lot of folks consider it to be the signature game in NBA history, because at least that's something we were all around to see. I mean, very few people at this point were around when Wilt scored 100 that infamous night in Hershey, PA, of all places. Whew, man. Well, all right, folks. That's what's going on in the hardwood. I'm sure I've left out a couple of things. If I have, it'll be in the next aftershocks. There's so much going on right now. Just I keep looking, at my phone, going, "Wow, gee, if I can remember to squeeze this in too." All right, folks, we're cooking. We'll be back momentarily. All right, folks, what's up? Faithful host Kid Harlan here. Ice cold chillin', like a villain. Definitely not Bob Dylan. Not today. Not poetic. Wow. Let's go pitch side. This just watched a crazy match. Paris and Laguiole. Paris coming away with a 1-0 win. A very hard fought on the road. Tough week for Paris. There's a lot of panic going on. Because I told you about them losing to Paris FC in the French Cup. Paris FC's first win over their rivals from 44 meters across the way. And it's funny because I watch along for a lot of PSG matches. This kid, PSG INT, calls himself. There's quite a cadre of supporters and haters that are part of this whole community, we'll call it. And watching him and others, as they'll sit there and deconstruct every match 3 or 4 hours afterwards. Must be nice making that much for content creation that you can do that. Thanks for the soup chat, as he always says. Um, I sit there and just think this is why it is the beautiful game life. When, like, okay, in UCL, they lost to Sporting in Lisbon. Clearly outplayed them. I mean, like many teams, with the low block and kind of laying back, parking the bus, just trying to defend and hope PSG makes a mistake in the back, which they're prone to do. You're gonna get these periods where you're hitting the wood, you're having good chances, and it's just not your day. And I've seen this happen with a lot of teams. I've seen them, Mbappe and Madrid were kind of going this for a minute. Barcelona, City's kind of going through it right now. I talked to you about City playing so bad in Champions League the other day. They're paying the supporters traveling fees, I guess, because they felt so bad about it. I think folks just gotta stop being prisoner of the moment. And in that game, more than any that I watch, where it's not your day, happening more often than it should, but it does. When you watch this stuff and you're just like, yeah, you just can't get too angry, right? The technique's there, it's clinical, but a lot of times it's not that your day. And you can have a run of 3 or 4 games like that once that shit gets into your head. All right. But City and PSG both stumble on this match day as far as UCL goes. Chelsea, Liverpool, Barcelona, Bayern, Juventus all get wins. All good there. Arsenal, obviously the first team to qualify for the knockout round. Big matchup with PSG and Newcastle coming up. Oh yeah, forgot to mention Senegal winning AFCON. A lot of drama there, as you would expect. As I said the other day, a lot of teams really happy to get some of their best assets back after that wonderful competition. Okay, I know this is always going to get the haters up in arms whenever a publication like Sportico publishes this. So they did valuations for top 50 clubs as far as who's the most valuable, and this is globally. And in that list, 19 of the 50 clubs were da 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 MLS. I just went, wow. Only in this world, especially given how, well, just be nice about it, how interesting MLS is, and how their MLS is really kind of recoiling from threats from within, but yet has 19 of the 50 most valuable clubs. People go, well, just a lot of other clubs don't own their stadium. I'm like, no, they're in the top 50, 19 of them. That's almost half. And it makes you wonder about those folks who say it's such a shit league. I go, well, this world shit must actually be worth something. Something to behold. And that's why it isn't a shock to see something like Robert Lewandowski. He's like, yeah, I think it's time for me to go to MLS. It's kind of interesting that Griezmann didn't take his opportunity to go there, and LA went with Son instead. But you got to figure at some point Griezmann would as well. I think the interesting thing about Son is getting somebody who's still in their prime. You saw what happened with Ollie G. A lot of times it's hit or miss with these guys that are on their last lap. I mean, Messi, that's a whole nother constellation as far as, him and his boys and what they've done with MLS. But yeah, Lewandowski wanting to come here this summer, that definitely piques my interest, as it should anybody else's. Yeah. Okay, what else do we got going on here? I think about, the MLS really trying to be ambitious. It's kind of like the same dilemma that MLB kind of has right now in terms of, gee, how do we get it, a bigger share in a football dominated world? Not football proper, American football, damn it. And it is intriguing as we get closer and I start to see, the media campaigns and the teams are playing their preseason friendlies. What can MLS do to sort of actually get a buzz? I've already talked about the thing with Apple and local markets. It's got to be beyond that. There's some great conversations because Miami and its ambition, and I see the same thing. I look at Miami kind of being like the Dodgers, and folks saying it's not fair, and the league kind of going, well, hey, Beckham wants to be ambitious to get us on the map. We might let this slide. In that same way, where baseball's doing the same thing with the Dodgers. Like, well, and right now, Manford loves it, right? My man over at MLS, he loves it as well with Miami. Why wouldn't you? And it's kind of funny. It's like, I'm an LAFC fan, and LAFC fans, right? Some of the most impatient and irrational fans in all of MLS. And all kind of in there, the theme this week is, our deep pocketed owners want to talk a big game, but they really are more interested in their bottom line. Whereas Miami really wants to win trophies and establish a legacy while they have Messi. And I said, that's interesting because I think both of those models can work in this MLS. If you're an LAFC fan, you're kind of cranky, especially because you haven't signed a third DP in 4 or 5 years. You want them to be aggressive like the Dodgers are because, Mark Walter owns a piece of LAFC, as does Magic. But they're wise in terms of what they're getting out of their investment. I mean, there's only so much you can do when you are throwing your resources into a big pot. Not one pot, but a big pot, big set of pots. That cool set you get on QVC. If you call right now, it's $3.49 as opposed to $9.99. Well, yeah. Okay. I don't know where I was going. Let me get the train back on the tracks. Let's talk some global soccer here. Plenty of time to talk about MLS in the coming weeks. City's struggling. I told you about them losing in UCL, and they lost the Manchester Derby to United. A team, trying to find itself. So, yeah, I can see City folks kind of sitting there. I know Pep's kind of has that bewildered look on his face. The Madrid folks are tripping because Mbappe's trying to do Mbappe things, and now that they pushed Xabi to the side, everybody seems to be happy. In fact, Vinny has come out and said he wants to stay in Madrid beyond 2027. Oh, surprise! You get the coach fired, and hell yeah, I want to stay as long as the next permanent thing is to my liking. Gotta love the world we're living. Okay. Gotta give Ronaldo, since I mentioned Messi, I better give Ronaldo some love so I don't get the hate all around. Pinaldo, as his haters call him, netted his 960th goal in El Nasser's win on Wednesday evening, getting closer to the 1,000. Pretty Wheaties like, I'll say that. Over on the women's side of the equation, our girl Rose Lavelle, yeah, that Rose Lavelle, wins the United States Women's Player of the Year. Flowers there. Flowers also to the NWSL and solving the whole Trinity Rodman contract nightmare. It's all done. It ends up her being 3 years, over $1 million a year. Put that in your pipe and smoke it, WNBA. Excuse me. Okay, so somehow I managed to use the NWSL to take a shot at the WNBA. Must be time to exit this segment and move on to talking some Nightfall and Diamonds, which we will do when we come right back. All right. Welcome back to the Foxhole. Faithful host Kid Harlan here, breezing through Friday afternoon. Foxtrotting in a Foxhole. Number 298, getting closer to 300, y'all. Milestone indeed. Okay, let's do a little Dark Star crashes first. Hop on the hippie bus as we always do before talking a little baseball. Man, the Bob Weir send off down there in the plaza in the city. Quite the scene, huh? A lot of moving tributes. Right? Sammy Hagar, Willie Nelson. I mean, Pelosi, boy, that was something else. A lot of rambled on there. Almost felt like we had to grab the cane like they used to do, the long cane, and yank you off the stage. Joe Baez, boy, almost paired together as far as, yeah. We'll just keep it fair and leave it at that as far as those two were concerned. But that's cool with his daughters coming out there. Even John Mayer leading everybody in Ripple when they couldn't really do a sing along. So, John Mayer, I don't really think much of him. As you all know, we call him the Snooze Factory, but he had some nice words. And so, yeah, it was quite a moment. Obviously, hearing from the drummers, Bruce, guys that were actually in the band. We would like to have seen, that could have gone on for 4 or 5 hours of just people that, were related to the family and what it meant to them. And I think we would have been watching it for hours. In fact, we were watching stuff that went on after the memorial was over going on in the hate. Bands playing and all the way up until the thing with Phil's kids playing at the Warfield, the Howling Wolves, I believe it was called. So yeah, it was an interesting day. But of course, we have to get back to reality now that, the Major Domo, right, the tribal chief has checked into, the big concert hall in the sky. And of course, folks are already talking nonsense about, hey, John and Hotel need to keep this thing going. And I just went, man, this is why people laugh at deadheads. Clearly it's been done for a long time. No matter what you think of Snooze Factory, Wolf Brothers, Billy's Kids, right? I mean, maybe there are some folks who are so hardcore they don't even think, right? The classic Q, Phil and Friends, further, the Rat Dog, that, right? Folks that say it was even done before that. I said it when they were the Dead, which kind of ends up being the classic Q in a way. I saw them, what was this? This was probably '03 or '04 up in Columbia Meadows. I thought, man, they needed to put the bus, they needed to park the bus in the barn then. But whatever the case may be. But these people keep talking about, oh my God, it has to continue. I think I don't know what Bobby meant. I never liked to think what Jerry would. Well, Jerry would have thought this. How the fuck do you know what Jerry or Bobby really wanted? I mean, sure, the way it was, we thought Bob would be playing these songs till he's 120, and I get that. But with the endless stream of dead cover bands, legit or whatever, the music's never gonna die, people. Stop worrying about that tour. Maybe that's all you've been doing. Maybe follow some other bands, or maybe come up with a new hobby. Maybe do a podcast about how you miss being on tour with the Dead and how your life is now incomplete. But stop dragging this thing on unnecessarily. It's okay for certain things to end. The Beatles ended in 1970, and their legacy will never die. Okay? All right. Do you like it that the Biscuits announced some West Coast states going to be playing in the city on Bicycle Day? No Northwest love, but where my bank balance is right now, I don't need a couple nights in the Northwest freaking and peaking with the Biscuits. I'm just glad that they are giving the West Coast some more love. Not sure. Haven't heard anything from the fish camp. You know, obviously, yeah, Trey. He forgot to mention that he chimed in as well for Bobby. All right, let's park the bus. Let's talk some baseball here. Boy, we did stretch that out way longer than usual. Dark Star does indeed crash. Somber one. R.I.P. to three-time All-Star Wilbur Wood. When I was growing up, big star pitcher for Chicago. Yeah, yeah. You know, kind of when I was coming up though, right? In my early days of watching baseball. But yet, nonetheless, a significant of a fellow to give a shout out to. Okay. As I was mentioning earlier about the whole baseball thing, leaving ESPN and going back to the Peacock NBC. To go along with that, they're bringing back Bob Costas. He's going to be the studio host. What does the Foxhole think about that? Because you know we have lots of things to say when it comes to Robert and his uncanny sense of inserting himself into everything historical, whether he was there or not. The way you hear him wax about DiMaggio and Ted Williams, you'd think that they were kissing cousins. But that said, sure, I have no problems being a boomer myself, bringing Bob back into the mix. I mean, having Al Michaels stumble with Kirk Herbstreit isn't really killing us. I mean, yeah, we'll complain about anything anyways. So, yeah, I don't think that's a bad thing, bringing a familiar face in. After all, it's about views, and I don't think he's going to be that offensive to the young crowd unless he says something that goes against, you know, the woke, weird nature of this world has become. Sure, no problems with Bobby Costas anchoring NBC Sunday night coverage. Glad to see it going back to a network, and I think they'll do a better job than ESPN has done in recent years. So that's good there. So Andrew Jones and Beltran get into the Hall of Fame. Boy, I don't know what to say, especially with this particular clash. You know, Kent getting the legacy earlier in the year, and now these two. Manny for his connection to PEDs, nowhere near getting enough votes. But I look at these elections and I think, well, Beltran was on that team that cheated, that beat the Dodgers and among others to get that ring. And yeah, they had some success before, but if you're not going to let Barry and Roger and Manny, guys who are deserving, but we're gonna vote this guy in who's associated with who knows what how deep the shenanigans go with that. It's just like a double standard I don't like. I mean, I've already said my piece about it going along the lines of what Deion Sanders says about football's Hall of Fame. And in a Hall of Fame, if it ain't a Hall of Fame, if you know what I mean, meaning you gotta be all-time great badass to be in there to be considered. Why isn't a Hall of Fame if everybody can get in? You know, I've been on this soapbox many times, and it's not a hill to die on for me. You know, it's just a baseball that used to have something, and I saw some stuff today. You know, where we had those criteria that it was easy to get, but now with the way things are, especially with pitching, notice there were no pitchers in this class. It's harder to judge what you think as a Hall of Fame career. You know, obviously the standard that we grew up on, you know, where it was easy, you got 3,000 hits, 15 ribbies, 500 home runs, 300 wins, usually 3,000 strikeouts, and you get some Cy Youngs and some other stuff. You usually were in. But nobody's going to, especially in the pitching side of the equation, nobody's going to get there. Now, 500 home runs, I could see somebody getting there. You know, with both like Judge and, you know, he's kind of old, but like Utani, maybe, right? You know, excuse me, you string together a couple of 50 home run seasons and anything's possible. But you're not going to see too many people put up the kind of numbers where it was easy. So even though my boomer sense of what a Hall of Fame used to be, as opposed to what it is now, somewhere in between the truth lies, I suppose. Okay. Yeah. Where are we now? Boy, double standard. That's great. We'll keep on that theme. Is there a lockout on the horizon? We talked about this on Aftershocks the other day with the Dodgers acquiring Mr. Kyle Tucker, triggering everyone, but the Yankees re-upping Mr. Bellinger, not a ripple. And it is an interesting question. If the Dodgers had continued to choke like they did pretty much from 2013 to 2020, and then even after 2020 a couple of times, would we be having this conversation? Or would we just be wetting ourselves because they're spending all this money and basically being what PSG and Oregon used to be until last year and what Oregon's been? Throwing all this money but nothing to show for it. But the fact that now they have 3 rings because, yes, the last 2, going back to back especially, cancels out anything negative you can really say about the COVID championship. Especially when you go back to back, as the Red Hot Chili Peppers say, a badass fact. There you go. I get this, and as I said on Aftershocks, blame it on Marvin Miller for giving baseball's players union some teeth and the ability to fight back. I mean, does it get to a 1994 level? And even if it does, as you'll see in the Rosie Ken Burns way of his documentaries, baseball will always be resilient. It took a few licks, but it always bounces back. And it has, as baseball is probably as popular now as it's been this century. If we're going to start using the turn of the century as a great demarcation line, which it really is when you think about certain things that have happened, especially in the major 3 American sports. And so, I don't have a problem with starting to look at, right, pre-millennium, post-millennium, as far as how we start to see and categorize things. People are already doing it. I guess I'm, jumping on that bandwagon as well, because when you kind of look at it and contextualize and conceptualize it, it does make sense. Gee, I don't know how I got there, but I did. So yeah, lockout on the horizon. We'll see. It appears so. I think certain owners are going to lock the players out, trying to make them take a cap, and they're going to say, "Oh hell no, cap my ass." And if it does come to that, it's going to get bloody. Because unlike the wacko queens of the court in their dispute, which I'm questioning how much ice they have in their veins, they could prove me wrong. We've seen it in baseball a few times where, yeah, we can miss some checks. We can go through some heartache. All right. I don't know what you feel the West Coast, and I was thinking about this, and I was putting this outline together. When you are the Mariners, Padres, Angels, and Giants, right, and you have this coastal elite as far as the Dodgers are concerned and what they've been building. What is your strategy? We all know it's easy, like what's it, Kruk and the other guy that do the Giants games on the radio. They've got a Facebook page, and they're always doing the number 2 on the Dodgers anywhere they can. We get that. But your marketing and your approach has to go beyond just hating on the Dodgers. Kind of look at some of the acquisitions. You see the Giants that had problems getting through customs, but everything seems to be okay with that. The Angels, we know about their struggles and what Artie should do, but so far hasn't as far as selling the team is concerned. Maybe some of the scandal and some of now that the scandals have abated or been resolved, maybe they can get some shine. I mean, if you lose Tony to the Dodgers, kind of hard to shake that one off. Really fascinated with the Padres. Who, they're like, they're like that boring tool. I just don't know what their destination is, right? As far as that underground tunnel they're trying to find to get to ultimate success. Okay, there's some moves last week though, along with the Dodgers getting Tucker, the Yankees re-upping with Mr. Bellinger, the Mets quietly signed 7 players, among them getting Bo Bichette, last seen in Toronto, 3-year deal there. So Mr. Cohn is spending money, and I agree with the talking heads that say the teams with the assets that have ambition are being ambitious. So why all the belly aching? Why all the crying? Why would we have to get to a lockout when there are teams that are being aggressive? There are other teams, as somebody pointed out on TV the other day, like the Pirates, cheapskate owner that aren't doing shit but just cashing their checks and laughing at us all. Okay, wow, I know this is an extended Nightfall of Diamonds. Usually this time of year it's going pretty quick. I'm like, wow, looking at the timer here. Leave you with these two. The Rays, who have been on my punch card as far as leaving Tampa, thinking that would make the most logical sense. Well, they're doubling down here. Apparently, they've got their eyeballs on a site at Hillsborough College. I don't know the Tampa area, but I'm guessing there's a lot of land available there. It's kind of, I do know it's near Steinbrenner Park, where they played last year, the Yankees spring training home. So we'll see. I mean, that was on my card to solve the expansion question. But maybe MLB does expand because, yeah, but we said we cool. We stay in here. Time will tell. Quick hop on the Zamboni to take a ride around the ice rink of life. Just a quick glance at the power rankings. I haven't done that in a hot minute. It's kind of interesting. The Avs still in the penthouse. Tampa Bay climbing up, trying to get back to championship form. Speaking of Tampa, there were 2. The Stars are 3. The Wild's 4, which is interesting at this point in the year. And you've got the Canes at 5, kind of what I would expect from them, somewhere hovering between 2 and 5. What's not so good, my Kings started the year so much promise. They're down at 21. What the F is up with that noise? Not digging that. All right, folks, we're cooking. When we come back, hopefully we will have a closer look. See you momentarily. Coolio. Alrighty, we are slowly winding things down as far as episode 298 is concerned. Time to opinionate, editorialize, talk a little trash or something like that, or I don't know, come to some realization. A closer look. Let's do it. Let me see here. Where are we at here? Yeah. Getting used to all the great setups we've got here. All the toys. And of course, nothing ever wants to work when it's supposed to. Now we get it. Ah, yay! Outline is back. Right, the Touch ID and it doesn't want to recognize it, and blah, blah, blah. What are we going to go with in a closer look today? Let's go with back to the family dynasty. I was talking to the buses earlier, talking about them, I should say. And I saw something interesting on TV where somebody was going on a rant. Basically, yeah, I was watching, it wasn't TV, it was online. And it was basically Coach JB, Jason Brown, and Whitlock kind of going off, when it comes to, the offspring inheriting teams from their parents and basically running things into the ground. There's a lot of interesting examples of that. I mean, this whole melodrama with the Bus Clan, great example. I mean, clearly, when the dad dies and the whole thing goes south with the logo and that wonderful relationship ruined forever. Now, obviously, as somebody else pointed out on TV, Nick Wright it was, that the Lakers, I think, prior to the 2010s, had missed the playoffs maybe once or twice per decade of that. After Jim Buss and company, all that nonsense, having like, what was it, five? So the worst stretch in franchise history. Kind of look at, the Dodgers after Walter O'Malley left and Peter took over. Yeah, it wasn't too bad. The Rooney's, you could say, although some people are saying that they're a joke of what they once were. I think both can be true when it comes to the Steelers. Same with the Yankees. I mean, the Yankees have only won one championship this century with Hal in charge. Mark Davis. But the thing is, the Raiders were so bad when Dad was in charge. I don't know if you can blame it all on Mark, but surely the resources that Mark has been given, you got to think Al would have made the Raiders something as opposed to his son just going around entertaining starlets in the skybox, praying he can hit a home run with Brady to save his ass. But that's a great example there. I don't know. It's just interesting, the family dynasty. Once it gets down to the kids and how they run things. I know people are making all kinds of jokes about Miss Ursay, right? Her drawing plays and running around in the hills and the headset. Too early on that one. And, you could arguably say Daddy outdid his daddy. His daddy had such a stench taking the Colts out of Baltimore to Indianapolis. Yeah, I think it's interesting, when you look at that we're moving away, obviously, from these mom and pop type of situations. Like I said, even the Waltons that own Denver, they got a lot of money pocketed people running that, as opposed to this thing that the Lakers have had going, where it was a true mom and pop shop. And one of the more recognizable brands, period. And you can't run something like that as a mom and pop. And you're seeing some of the stuff that's come out here with their brothers and LeBron and Clutch. I mean, and this is so Mickey Mouse. You would think a brand like the Lakers would be above that. I mean, right? Finding a way to enrich Kurt and Linda Rambis because they were your lieutenants. I mean, what kind of nonsense is that? Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of pot shots that Jeannie is taking, and deservedly so, because she's made a lot of missteps. I try to stay away from the DEI conversations that claim that's what elevated her to a place she never belonged. No, she learned under Papa, and Papa trusted her. I mean, I don't think the younger boys who obviously who's got they, what I understand, have high basketball acumen and maybe in due time would have been suited to help run this thing. But at this point, her being ruthless, she gets to somehow be a part of the picture and cut everybody out. So be it. I think for the Lakers and the NBA, it's the best because it is going to put it into the LeBron era, one way or the other. I have a feeling that Mark Walter would do it anyways, but maybe this is all part of the grand design. I mean, this is 2026 after all, so nothing's out of the realm when it comes to being diabolical. I don't know. I just think it's an interesting conversation, and this whole week especially centered around that. It's made for great TV. Let me slip with something else here because something tells me more information comes out, the more we'll get a chance to speak even more coherently as far as the Lakers and other family dynasties that supposedly are running their teams into the ground. Hey, Ken, don't forget about the McCaskies and. Yeah, it's an interesting one. Hey, they're rocking right now, though. How about Comic Cam on full display? We'll call that our next one. What I mean by Comic Cam? No, not the thing that you cosplay and brag on Facebook that you got out of town a winter and got to dress up like Wonder Woman and be bad bitch. No, I'm talking about Cam Newton. That Comic Can. He forget Dave Chappelle. Isn't he kind of running his one man show with all his shenanigans? Great, bro. You work out and all this stuff. And this isn't really crumbing on him for speaking his mind, because that's kind of his platform that, well, we've been muzzled. That's kind of where I agree with the Whitlocks of the world. Not, I don't agree with everything Whitlock says, but I think he's right on target when it comes to these guys who end up clouding themselves. I mean, you can't wait to come at Josh Allen with all the slings. Now, and arrows. Now, when you lost that one Super Bowl, all of your failures, I don't remember everybody just hanging you out to the dry the way Josh Allen is. Maybe I got amnesia. We just didn't think you were that good. Thought you were okay, and we're very impressed when you got as far as the Super Bowl. But nobody ever thought of you as being what Josh Allen is. And maybe it's our fault for propping Josh Allen up a bit too much. Because I do believe that is happening as well. But this idea that every time a white quarterback fails in the playoffs, you got to commit the same receipts. I don't get where that's coming from. I've seen people like Monty Jones, obviously the usuals, Ryan Clark, Jamel Hill, and I'm sitting there thinking about this, and I'm going, Justin Herbert, who hasn't had a lot of playoff success, was he like 0-3 now? It's only been like 3 times. We're talking about Lamar, who's been there multiple times, and you don't get it done. Josh Allen maybe got a pass because he's in an era of Mahomes who's got quite a few trophies, quite a few appearances in the AFC Championship game, which means he beat him in G. If after Brady in this century, since we're looking at things post millennium now, it's Brady then Mahomes, I think it's fair to say. So, have we been harsher on Lamar for not getting it done? I think it's more about Lamar not getting it done and this inferiority complex. Like, oh, you're always coming down on the brother for not getting it. And Cam, I don't remember. Okay, yeah, you won that national championship at Auburn, and that's pretty laudable. The Panthers were okay with you and Steve Smith and Morgan and all those other guys, but I don't ever remember folks thinking you were all that. You were pretty good. And this idea that if you could still come out and play, I'll get to Philip Rivers in the next segment, but nobody wants to put up with your nonsense. And you know that. And I can't crumb on you for saying that because I think that was kind of one of the things that came out in the whole Kaepernick era as far as, getting off the plantation and being able to speak your mind, which is quite fun. But as somebody who's followed the NFL now for almost 6 decades, that's not how it works in the NFL. No, a lot of corporate America. And in the end, when you get in a not for long world, you sort of toe the line. And it's the only reason why you didn't have to toe the line is because you won the genetic lottery. But there's a point where winning the genetic lottery, the sand in the hourglass runs out on you. And it ran on you, and now that maybe you still could come out and be a game manager and make a few plays, but does the team want to deal with the attitude and the nonsense that comes with it? And the answer obviously is no, and that's why the phone isn't ringing, and that's why I say it's Camicon. And you offering all your opinions, great, you have a platform, and that's good that you're successful in the field has provided you a platform to have post football. But why don't you focus on giving us good analysis as opposed to being one of the ringmasters when it comes to the RHBA? Okay, we got enough hustling and baiting going along. RG me's guilty of that as well, but at least I think he's starting to see the light a little bit and really hone in on his ability to give good analysis. Who knows? Maybe if you shut the fuck up, you can get Romo's job because the public apparently is tired of him. I don't know. I'll leave it at that. Let's get cracking with the NFL report when we return. All right. Closing you out here on a fabulous Friday. Does it we cool like that? Foxtrotting in a Foxhole, episode 298. Faithful host Ken Harlan here. Eagles Nest 2, Studio B. As Mina Kimes is breaking down our X Factors over there on the Metroplex. Getting ready for a fine NBA Friday, among other things. Yeah, no, it's crazy. The fun part of the year is kind of winding down, and it's winding down with a flurry, I might say. But now that college football is parked its semi for maintenance until we get to next season. NFL down to the final four, so that corral is going to end soon, and we start moving into the winter spring sports phase of the year. Yeah, should be shuffling content, but we'll be pumping out Foxtrotting in the Foxholes and Aftershocks repeatedly. I can stress again, please like and subscribe FTINFX Media's YouTube channel. We need all the likes and subscribes we can get our hands on. We can get this here or at Spotify where it's been for years. But definitely Aftershocks is a YouTube thing. Get to watch my mug. And when we have guests, and if you want to be a guest, we'd love to have you. Okay, let's get out of here. NFL time. Well, the coaching carousel obviously took a dramatic turn, with Harbaugh, John that is, coming to terms with the Giants, getting unique control. I don't know how the hierarchy is going to work. They say it doesn't matter, but it does. McDermott, how that whole played out in Buffalo, which is strange. And where's Josh Allen? Who's going to be Josh Allen's next coach? There's a lot of vacancies still. I talked about this on Aftershocks. The weird thing with Baltimore and Pittsburgh. And I get that there are still teams that are playing, kind of waiting on their coordinators. It's this interesting, moment out there where, is there some hidden gem out there, like a Mike McDonald? I mean, McVay wasn't that known. I mean, I knew who he was because I know his lineage, and he was with my team, with Jay Gruden and then Mike Shannon before that. But it wasn't, common knowledge to a lot of folks. And I think it's kind of interesting this hire with Jesse Minter. So there's so much going on with NFL right now. The intrigue that's going to set up for the next season. I mean, clearly, there's some folks that do believe what I said the other day about Lamar at the blackjack table in Las Vegas is not that far fetched, and it would be interesting because you could, I don't know what kind of picks you could extort from Baltimore that would make it worth your while, especially what they've done. But who knows? You know, some pieces like they said trade Max Crosby as well. That I can see Mendoza on the Ravens in this new regime because they hired Jesse Minter. You know, was with the organization before and went to Michigan recently and San Diego. Highly regarded. A defensive mind, just like the man up in Seattle. But some folks say he should be excited to play with Lamar, and there are others who make some pretty sound points. Stuff the RHBA don't want to hear, you know, and that you're hating and you're going to really come with receipts now that you've said this. But Lamar getting advanced, not long on the tooth per se, but advanced and starting to absorb the a lot of the wear and tear. We're going to see that with a lot of these guys now that they're approaching 30. You know, that's a major concern for Justin Herbert because he's taken a lot of hits. But it is interesting, you know, in terms of where the Ravens may go. And that's, I'm kind of curious. You know, would they move off of Lamar right now? And would the Raiders, man, and even though Brady's in the room, like I said last week, or maybe I said it on Aftershocks, he's got to prove to me he knows what the hell he's doing in the boardroom. You can go on calling and talk all the shit you want. As we know, there's successes upstairs and there are failures. Seldom in between. Give me the benefit of the doubt. Like I said, I've already got my questions because you signed off on Pete Carroll. If your Acuum was what everybody thinks it is, you wouldn't have done that. A lot of us were fooled, but you're supposed to be the guy that knows. You up there talking about it on TV. Mission Stefanski and all the slings and arrows about that. Fucking Jamel Hill, fucking being fucking a clown princess as she always is, saying that this was a slap in the face to Dion because Dion played in Atlanta and knows Black Atlanta. He's the logical choice. Woman, please. Okay. Clearly, Mr. Blank felt that way, and Mr. Blank is no dummy. Dion would have been called. Shador would have been taken instead of going after Michael Penix, and we'd have a whole different narrative. But since Dion's really yet to prove that he can truly make Colorado a team we take seriously, not for click kicks and giggles where we are so far, a modest amount of success, and that's being nice. So can we, you know, I know you being not just a card carrying member of the RHBA, but being you know on the board of directors, tone it down for 2 seconds. Okay, I mentioned the other day about Salah to Tennessee. Not sure if that really works for either side. Time will tell. Hope you get a good coordinator there for to help develop Cam Ward. Halfway to Minnesota. I meant Minnesota, Miami. I don't know enough about this guy yet to really make a read. Seems like a safe choice. Maybe it made a swing for Harbaugh, and he took New York, and we discussed previously why that is. I mean, that just makes so much sense. And although Miami's not a bad job, so we'll see there. I mean, I kind of like the guy's pedigree, but I gotta like dig in more. I'll comment after I've done my research. Lafleur, as we discussed previously, right? The extension there. I, I guess it makes sense. I mean, I could see how Green Bay could have moved on from him, but since Green Bay, you know, the corporation for the longest time, and you know, not the mom and pop thing, but kind of, but not really. You know, it's moved to the corporation. they like stability, in that Pittsburgh way, and they're not a dumpster fire. They're not close to getting the champagne, in my opinion, but they can contend, or at least keep people or trick people into thinking they are. So in that regard, yeah, he's not. I don't think he's done anything horrible. Because obviously, if that were the case, you'd get rid of Dan Campbell, and that's not happening anytime soon. Just saying. EB returning to Arrowhead. It's been an interesting journey for Mr. BME, hasn't it? Hey, well, I'm curious to see what's going on with this move, or what's going to happen, I should say, with this move. It's clear there's been something missing from the Chiefs with EB out of the building. Maybe they recapture some of that. Maybe he's not a head coach. Because obviously his stints as a coordinator elsewhere, eh, Washington, UCLA, But obviously he had some contributions being over in Chicago. So obviously this dude's a good coordinator. Head coach material, maybe not. At least thus far. Brian Flores, as many people have pointed out, he's always going to be a good candidate. Maybe this is more ammo for his lawsuit, but he blackballed himself. And I'm thinking if it's not the Steelers, I still wonder if he's too abrasive for that organization. But if it's not the Steelers, I just don't see this cat getting the job. After all, you are suing the league. Then Jay Glazer, speaking of Tomlin, comes out and says he's done coaching. And I thought, wow, I believe Jay Glazer. And I do get the sense that Tomlin, after his long run, like, shh, I don't need this shit anymore. I can do what Bill did at Cower. Next 15, 20 years, just be cold chilling like a funky cold Medina. So, yeah, I would not be surprised at all if the phone rings and he doesn't pick up. Says, I'm through with this. And my hat's off to him. Somebody who walked away with a ring on his finger, went to another Super Bowl. Coolio. The world doesn't want to hear that, but I think that truly may be the case. More power to him. Philip Rivers getting an interview for the Bills. I am with those boomer types. Even the RHBA, which is rare for me, but this is a slap in the face to a lot of folks. In a world where you can find a Kirk Cinetti, a Mike McDonald, you're trying to tell me this guy whose experience is coaching at a high school, coming back in his 40s this year, deserves to shut it. How did that work with Jeff Saturday? Didn't work so well. And maybe you want to pick his brain, and that's the case. I like that, build the process up. But come on, there are a lot of interesting candidates out there who probably didn't get a chance to interview, who probably deserve that opportunity. If you're hiring this guy for Josh Allen, the Bakulas, you're all more fruity than I thought was possible. And that guy, we'll get to that in a second. All right, man. Let me wrap this up a little bit. I kind of talked about the playoffs itself. This whole thing with Knicks is crazy. A lot of positive vibes though with Jared Stidham. They feel they can come out there, especially with their defense. The Seahawks. Damn. We've slowly have had to come around to this is it. Mike McDonald, like I said a second ago. Not surprised he's finalist for Coach of the Year. Well deserved. Yeah, the Rams. But we'll make our picks here in a minute. Let me just get to a little bit more business here. A.J. Brown wants out of Philly. Roses are red, violets are blue. Not surprised by any of that. Question is, where's he a good fit at where you can sort of keep him engaged, enthused, and with the program? Because clearly, the thing with Jalen Hurts, be right, it's almost like Russell Wilson 2.0. Maybe not as phony, more arrogant, but that same kind of vibe where your team just does not want to deal with you, and you're seeing all kinds of cracks. And we already said this is not a likable bunch when it comes to the Eagles, and him wanting to get off the right, the SSS dysfunctional. Okay, I mean he's a big part of that. John Lynch, speaking to the substation controversies I spoke about that earlier, he also in that same press conference basically said, yeah, Brendan Ayuk has played his last down with the 49ers. No shock there. What shocks me more is people in my fan base, the Commanders, like saying, yeah, I would be no to Brian Flores as a defensive coordinator, but I wouldn't mind bringing Ayuk on. I'm like, oh, this guy who could probably fix a defense that's been porous this whole century versus a guy who quit on the 49ers when they needed him the most. Yeah, that's 2026 for you. All right, folks. Let me get my picks in here for conference championship weekend. Where am I sitting here? Okay, NFC. Mm, 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 mm. Yeah. Wow. This is crazy. Rams and the Seahawks, part 3. Yeah, I am gonna take the Rams 23-19. Hold the Seahawks to a lot of field goals. I think the Rams win by 4. Over in the AFC, I know. But you know what? I've been writing this trade all year long. Spurs betting against both of these teams, but really betting against the Patriots. And I know without Bo Nix, I got to be out of my mind. But I still like Sean Payton at home. Probably the second time this week because I used that kind of logic to take the Canes, and you see where that got me with that one. But I'm going to take the Broncos in a stunning upset. That this trend of the Patriots never winning there and always having nightmares when they should have. I mean, Brady would have 2 more rings if it wasn't for having to go through Denver and whatnot. So, yeah, I think history repeats itself. The Broncos win a ugly, ugly game. Something like, ooh, man, what would I have this be? I'm going to say 19-14. A lot of field goals, ugliness. The pumpkin Drake May finally turns into a pumpkin. He's been playing Santa Claus already in this playoffs. I think it continues with Denver's defense. And this is a weird one, but I do think Stedham does enough. And Sean Payton's smart enough that they pull off a major stunner here. So, yeah. I can't believe this stuff, man. I got the Rams. I got the Rams Broncos Super Bowl. Okay? We'll check the tape later. The truck is here from the foundry containing the stainless steel bowls of the smelliest, and I mean smelliest varieties that come in complimentary, regular, and XL sizes. It's TMCA time. You know, the awards we give out at the end of this podcast every week for those whose deeds during the week earn that distinction, or as we like to say, being who you be. Well, I'm going to give this person, I will give him a regular, okay? It's not XL worthy. Well, no, it is XL worthy. Matter of fact, it's 2XLs. Who's kidding who here? The clown who paid 26K to go see the Natty. 26K. You got that kind of money to burn, and you needed to see the Canes and the Hoosiers that bad. Yeah. Yeah, that just, man, when we were watching the game on TV, aesthetically, I'm sure the atmosphere was great, and you hear Joel Klatt and Kirk Herbstreit like, "Oh, this is so good. This is what college is about." 26K my ass. Wow. Okay, I'm gonna give 2XLs to the Magulas. Terry and Kim, the owners of the Bills, talked about them, driving around in their yacht earlier in the year the last time I gave them awards. Now him interjecting in this press conference, just making the whole thing with firing McDermott and all this stuff, just a shit show that the public didn't need to see. Throwing the one kid under the bus and the coaches, man, yeah. If this organization kind of spirals into mediocrity and becomes a better version of what Jimmy Haslam's doing in Cleveland, I don't think the world's going to shed too many tears. Well, and Russell's not around to see this nightmare. Wow. Okay. I'm going to give an XL because you should know better at this point. To my man, Sweet and Low, because he's seldom sweet and often low, Lamar Odom. What the fuck are you doing, bro? Getting the DUI in Vegas. Right, sure, bro. If you can afford to be in Vegas getting your party on, you can call an Uber. There's no need for you to draw attention to yourself in that manner at this point in your life, especially when things are good. Especially apparently, you had been in a rehab. You were doing, your check-ins at a rehab not long before this, from what I understand. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Come on, Lamar. Man, I'm gonna give 3 XLs. Did you see this nut job? I think it was in LA. Yeah, it was somewhere in LA. That was this kid had a 49ers jersey on. It was a tough enough week for the 49ers getting blasted by the Seahawks. Some guy sees this guy with a 49ers jersey and starts chasing him with a machete through the streets of LA. The kid has to duck into a laundromat. The dude takes the machete and bashes out the windows and walks away. Wow. They say KJ is cool, but come on, man. Because that's gotta be doing the love boat or something like that. The PCP thing. Yeah. People start acting crazy like that. Jeez. Okay. I'm going to give it XL. I'll just give him a regular. He didn't need an XL. But I'm going to give Warren Sapp one. Apparently going all thug life with some female Hoosier fans. Hey, man, take it out on Canes players. They were the ones that let the Hoosiers come into the Canes house. We know it ain't the OB, but still, come into their house and walk over with a natty. Go cuss them out. Getting cranky with some ladies who are just celebrating. Because after all, it is the natty. And we do play for that, for that golden blunt or whatever you want to call the natty trophy. Ooh, man. I gotta give an XL to Jackie Brown, also known as Pam Grier. Wow. She's been taking a lot of heat, talking about seeing lynchings as a kid. The problem is that the state she grew up in, there hasn't been lynchings supposedly since 1911. And she was born in 1950, so you do the math. As far as that goes, and getting everybody on The View to cry, which shouldn't be a surprise, but come on, man. Especially when people can fact check you. When people say it was unwritten. I'm like, no, not the way things were at that point. We're still talking, probably between, 1950 and 1965. Highly unlikely in Ohio. Come on, Pam. Wow. I'm just going to give complimentaries all around and 2 XLs for the RHBA, the Race Haters and Baiters Alliance, for all the shit they've dished out this week. I talked about it in Aftershocks. Coming at Josh Allen, coming at Carson Beck. Not everything requires receipts. Not every hire requires a dissertation on why Dion should have gotten the job. Why this is suppression against Shador. Man, you clowns. Speaking of race baiting and clowns, I gotta give an XL to Don Lemon for just being a never-ending clown show. Yeah, he's not. Yeah, this guy, man. No wonder even Bocassian and Told you to hit the bricks. Lastly, complimentaries all around. I'm going to give 3 to the Hall of Shame. For you fools who have spent $60 to subscribe to Jody Harris's blog. Are you fucking kidding me? Pardon my language. You spent $60 when you could have gone to the bar and gotten lit. But instead, you're wanting to subscribe to what Jody Arias, that cold-blooded killer, is doing. That's just as crazy as Casey Anthony commenting on the shooting of Renee Good. Yeah, make it make sense, poor me people. Okay, folks, we have reached the finish line of episode 298. As always, thanks for putting up with me. Keep an eye out for content. You never know. I may get with the boys and do another stream or something like that, or if things get crazy enough, pump out another aftershocks or trimmers or something to that effect. Otherwise, you'll hear from me midweek with another aftershocks and this episode anywhere in the next 6 to 8 days, which will be episode 299. Meantime, stay safe, sane, have lots of adult beverages and good food and good company over the weekend. Avoid the bracelets as always. Yeah, we always encourage that. All right, people. Big weekend ahead. We'll see how our picks turn out. A lot of good viewing. See you very soon.